All right, I think we're live. How is everybody? Usually, I want to start my streams with a bit of music and maybe play a little intro, but I tried to do that last week with a little bit of music from a movie, and YouTube gave me a strike. So, if you can hear me, just let me know in the comments. I just want to make sure everybody can hear, and then I'll start getting going. Today, I'm going to talk about Batman the Detective and how it is, well, not one of the worst comics that I've ever read, but certainly something that does not get a recommend from me and in a very special way. So I just want to wait a minute. If someone can hear me, just want to make sure, just put that in the comments and I will get started. Also, thank you very much. I am going to try a couple of new things today. Last stream I skipped last week because I'm trying to get this down correctly. Most people were saying in the comments that the stuff I was showing in the background wasn't of very good quality. So I thought that I would put a little more effort into what was going on this week and see if I could get a little better quality for everybody. So first off, I'm going to try something here before I get to the comments. I'm going to talk about Batman the Detective, but I'm going to try to play this in the background. I don't know if this will actually work and you can still hear me at the same time. Hopefully it will be. I know that sometimes they cut off the audio when you play something in the background, but I am going to, like I said, just play this in the background. This is Batman the Detective. And like I said at the first of the stream, if everybody's coming in, I would like to start with a bit of music and a little bit of an intro, but I don't have an intro yet. So, and I don't want YouTube to strike me again for using any kind of music that I'm not supposed to, because they seem to like doing that. My last video that I did on Superman, they struck me for that because I used 1.5 minutes of a Superman reel from 1948, I think it was. Anyway, I can understand a little bit what they're going for, but I want to talk about Batman the Detective, which came out just this week. And I did a 10-second comic review on it, and I did not give this a good review. Now, I want to go over why. Normally, I would probably do a video on this talking about Batman because I like to talk about Batman. He's a good one to talk about, especially with the things that I discuss, which is logic and reason, because he's supposed to be the detective. And I saw this book on the shelf and I thought, okay, Batman the Detective. Literally, its name is The Detective. And it has good art, which is Andy Kubert. So I know some people don't like his art just because a couple of things are usually off that seem a little bit off, I don't know, perspective wise, but I usually like his art and I picked it up. But my problem with this book was not the art, although I'll have to say there are a couple of places where the art does fall down. My problem with this book is because I picked it up quite specifically because it was called Batman the Detective. And the thing is that the writer for this book is Tom Taylor. And I did not note that when I picked up the book and paid for it. If I had saw his name, I would have thought to myself, okay, maybe not. I really don't like Tom Taylor. I think most people who would frequent my channel know why you would not like Tom Taylor. You talk about woke, he is woke times 10. And I think it was a Suicide Squad that he had written last year that really drove it home for me of how, we'll say, disturbed this person can be when he writes, because he was trying to get some extra people, some people of, we'll call them people of representation, into the Suicide Squad. So he showed their crime, and their crime to get into the Suicide Squad, because they went to jail and then were drafted into the Suicide Squad, was that they picked up an army general. I think he was giving a speech on a submarine. They just picked him up, and one of them was a flyer. She had wings, and they put him about, I don't know, 50 feet into the air and then dropped him onto the ship again, where he automatically went crunch and then into the water and dead. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I understand that you're trying to get these characters into the Suicide Squad and that you have to show some kind of crime that they have committed in order for them to go to prison, in order for them to, again, be in the Suicide Squad. But what I'm not going to root for these characters no matter what. After you show them murdering a man in cold blood, I mean, I understand that most of the uh, characters are not good characters in any way, but at the same time, that's not what I'm going to root for in any way, shape, or form. So, so that's my introduction to Tom Taylor. That's really the first time that I. That's really the first time I noted his name, and the first time that I just said to myself, okay, I'm not going to read anything that this person writes. I'm just not. So the other reason why I picked this up and gave him a second chance was because I did read some of his, I think it was DC Deceased, and it did have some merit to it until it went completely woke. Now, I'm going to play this in the background again. I apologize. I'm still getting used to how this entire thing works. So I'm going to play this once more in the background so you have a sample of a couple of pages from Batman the Detective. I'm going to check the comments too to make sure everybody still can hear me. And I will get to your comments right after I discuss the book. But anyway, talking about Batman the Detective, and Tom Taylor's writing it, I figured that Batman the Detective would have some kind of callback to Batman being a detective. But Tom Taylor's, we'll say, style of writing that talks about Batman being a detective is that in about the middle of the book, Batman goes to the scene of a plane crash and he puts a scanner up on a pole and he uses his computer to scan all of the clues, like everything. It has it like it's one of the lines in the page that the computer picks up everything, every footprint, every fingernail, every DNA, everything. And the computer is the one who's doing the work, not Batman. So how is Batman the detective? I have no idea. Because he has a computer that can sift through all these things, that makes him a detective? I'm sorry. No, that doesn't make him a detective. It reminds me of what? I think the old Shadow books. I think this is where Batman actually gets broken to some degree in today's, I don't know, today's society. Because in the old Batman, because he was rich, it didn't mean that things would come easy for him when he's trying to solve a mystery. He still needed to do the legwork. He still needed to find the clues. He still needed to put them together. Sure, he had computers that would help him do that, but at the same time, he had to do the work. I used to do a research job, and it did have, we'll say, semi-legal connections to it. That is to say, I did work for legal institutions of one form or another. I was the one who did some of the legwork for not really solving any kind of mystery or crime, but just putting together things that were pieces and pieces just laying about here and there from different kinds of information. Anyways, that's basically a research job in a nutshell, just putting together a mystery out of things left over by other people. Anyways, it's a mystery and it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of putting things together. That's why you have montages. Okay, you have montages of people working on things. It's because you gotta put the work in. But if you get a computer to do all the work, then there is no detective. The computer is the one doing all the work. What good is Batman? And again, this is what I think actually breaks the character of Batman a bit. It's because, again, as a rich man previous to this age where we have thinking computers, yeah, he still had to put the work in, even though he was rich. But now that he's rich and he can buy a supercomputer and the computer can do all the work for him, then no, what good is he? Again, like I was saying, I think this reminds me a lot of the Shadow, the old Shadow radio plays and the old Shadow, we'll say, serials and things like that. I used to go to the library and get them on record so I could listen to the old Shadow plays. And it was more about the network of people that the Shadow had put together in order to solve crimes, really than the Shadow himself. He was the thing that connected all of these people, but the radio plays were about these people. And these people were the ones who picked up the clues. These people were the ones who picked up all of the little bits and pieces for him, and then he put it together as they were feeding him all the clues. So literally, I think the old Shadow would be him having a supercomputer of people. It's basically his computer was the network of people that he had, and it was very human, and you got to see all of the lives of these different people, and it was a really good way to tell a story. But when you make that, when you take away the human element of that, when you make the collecting of the clues happen from something else other than human beings, which is what you have within this book, which is called Batman the Detective, then it doesn't work. Okay? Because again, Batman might put together a couple of things, but he doesn't really figure anything out. Honestly, I think to myself, I'm looking at the art and I'm saying to myself with this book, the art looks like a callback to, I would say, probably the Snyder Justice League. That's what it's trying to. I think someone probably went to DC and said, okay, we have to sell the movie or sell the coming out of the movie. We want to sell the old Batman or the Batman in the movies because he very much looks like the Batman in the movies from that flash forward when he was in the desolate future where Apocalypse had taken over the earth and all that. So that's what Batman the Detective looks like in this book. And I think that was the entire reason to sell this book and make this book. They said, make this book that looks like that Batman. Although I would say Adam Kubert did a really good job on it by taking that and combining it a little bit with the old Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, which was the original graphic novel for the Dark Knight. He takes that sort of look for Batman and puts him in there. But again, calling it the detective, making it centered around the fact that he's a detective, it doesn't work because there is no detecting. Batman is not a detective in this. He's a computer analyst. That's it. And I got to say, the other thing about Tom Taylor's writing, and it happens a lot in comics now, and I can understand, it's first person, I guess it'd be first person omniscient, sort of, because you have the little bits in the background where you have the talking from Batman or Superman or whoever it is, and they know what's going on already, but you get these big, long conversations while they're in the middle of a fight scene. And from someone who, at the very least, I used to fight in a ring, right, as part of my hobby. No, you can't have a big old long protracted understanding of what is going on. It's move and don't get hit. It's move and make sure you stay alive, especially in these kinds of scenarios. Having this big old long protracted explanation of what is going on while at the same time he's in the middle of a fight, that doesn't work for me. I understand and I really like the way you can write with first person. That's the way the novel that I've written, which has never gotten published. I tried to write it a couple of times before I actually got anywhere with it. And the reason was because I didn't have the right perspective to write it in. And so I wrote it at the very last time in first person perspective, and it really worked for me. So I understand why people love to write in first person perspective, but it has to have limits. You can't have it in the middle of a fight. I think I understand why these people write conversations in the middle of a fight. And that's one of the other things with this book that I really didn't like. About page 3, there is a scene where you have hijackers that are taking over a plane and they blow a hole in the side of the plane and then they decide to escape by jumping out the door. They put on parachutes, of course. But the door's open, there's a hole in the plane, and they're 36,000 feet up, which is what it says in the book. And I'm sorry, but if you're 36,000 feet up, you're not going to be standing there having a conversation with someone, which is what they're doing, or B, having a fight with someone, which happens after while the conversation is going on. It's just, it anybody who knows anything about basic physics or have even seen a movie with a plane crash in it knows that this is not what happens at 36,000 feet. I'm sorry, but this scene is ridiculous. However, it is one of the driving forces behind how Batman gets sucked into this, because the person who is in the fight conversation scene is someone who Batman goes to and then talks to a little later and tries to get information from. She's called the Knight. If you don't know anything about Batman, that's all you really need to know. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, again, this is called Batman the Detective. And I'm always on about the way to make a story, and the good way to make a story is the fact that you have to make it a representation of reality. That's the way stories have been built for, at least 2,400 years in Western civilization. And if you're going to talk about Batman the Detective and have him pick up clues and put things together, wouldn't you at the very least want to have a situation where physics actually applies, where the normal, just everyday, common sense way that physics works would actually apply to your crime scene? But no. Tom Taylor, no, it's got none of that. It's conversation fight scene, conversation/fight scene, which is ridiculous itself, in a plane with an open door at 36,000 feet. Again, basic physics and basic understanding from watching movies, at the very least, is you can't have a conversation because there's going to be no oxygen left at 36,000 feet that you can breathe. That's why you need to put on oxygen masks if there's a hole in the plane. And secondly, you're going to get sucked out of the plane quicker than you can say Tom Taylor doesn't know how to write. Anyway, this is my big beef with this book. Again, I think it all centers around the fact that they decided to call it Batman the Detective. But again, that's not my only problem. I would probably have these problems with it even if it wasn't called Batman the Detective. By the way, this is just a miniseries. It's one of 6. So again, Tom Taylor really majorly messes up the storyline for this book. And if anyone else had written this and gotten the same basic points down, I would have probably given it a pass. But it's the ridiculous storytelling of Tom Taylor, because the art really almost brings it over the line in itself. Again, some people might not like Andy Kubert. I really do, although he has his limits. But again, it's Tom Taylor, and I don't think anybody should be surprised at the fact that Tom Taylor is screwing up another DC character. Anyway, I've ranted on this for about 20 minutes. I want to rant on it a little more, but I'll get into your comments and see if I can answer some of your questions here before I go any further. Okay. Also, I'm not going to get down to the end of these comments for a little bit. So I don't know why I'm even asking this question, but for my peace of mind, when I was playing the video with the Batman serial, with the Batman pictures from the Batman the Detective in the background, I just want to make sure that everybody could hear me while I was playing that video. Again, I don't know exactly how StreamYard works, so I'm a little bit useless when it comes to these things. So I'm going to say hello to a few people. Daniel was here very early, so I want to say how you doing, Daniel? You were here for about an hour waiting. Barry has a hey Barry. Barry has a really interesting question. I actually saw this before the stream started, and he says, RJ, what is the weirdest comic story you have ever read? That's a really good question. I thought about it before I started the stream, and honestly, that's a hard one to think about. But the only thing that really comes to mind right off is that there was a Green Lantern that came out last year, and I don't know what it was. I think it might have been an annual, and they were on a planet. I don't know who it was. It was Green Lantern, possibly the Flash. Well, it might have been a Flash annual. But anyways, it definitely had Green Lantern in it. And they're on a planet where you had giant babies who were omniscient, kind of godlike creatures. And then you had, it looked like, I don't know, cartoon drawings spilling out of the mind of some stoned 70s artist. And that was basically the comic. I couldn't even figure out what in the world was going on. And not only did I feel like I wasted my time, but or sorry, not only did I feel like I wasted my money, but I also felt like I wasted my time completely reading it. It was 20 minutes of my life, which I'll never get back. I think that was the weirdest comic in living memory, anyways, that I can think of right at the moment. Um, John Doe has a question which I cannot answer. He says, "Why you do this?" I don't know what he is referring to, so sorry. Oh, Nerdette's here. Great. I always love Nerdette here because, especially when I talk about DC books, because she has a lot more knowledge about DC books than I do. I only dip in and out of DC books when things look good to me. Although I'll have to say, I bought this Batman the Detective and I think one other DC along with a stack of Marvel just so I could do my reviews. And DC is head and shoulders above Marvel in quality of paper and printing. Uh, The, I mean, I'm just looking at the two of them together in a pile, and you can tell. You could definitely tell, especially where I am, where the pages are a little bit cold by the time we get them home because we're still in a cold area here, and the pages for the Marvel books look like they're about to fall apart. Look like they're about to crinkle up and disintegrate. Whereas the Batman, the Detective, at the very least, is printed on some nice paper. I'll give it that. DC again has head and shoulders printing quality above Marvel at this point. Let's see who else we got here. Anthony. Okay, not sure where all those question marks come from, Anthony. Who else we got? Sequential treasuries. All right. Let's go to, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, see if we have any questions. So I'll do the Zach once more. Scrolling down. Anthony says, "Hey, how you doing, Anthony?" We got a lot of faces here that I recognize. By the way, I just want to let everybody know. Well, first of all, like a couple of things before I go any further. Number one, um, uh, again, I'll say this a couple of times during my live streams, usually probably once every week. A lot of people have been telling me that they don't have or they don't know that I actually put out new videos because they never get informed about them. I put out a new video, one of my normal videos, not my live streams, but one of my normal videos almost every Saturday. If it's not a Saturday, it's a Sunday. So I don't think I've missed a Saturday or a weekend at the very least for over a year now. So if you're looking for new videos from me, they're posted every weekend, just to let you know. And the other thing being that I'm a very visual person, and the only way that I know everybody is uh, by their avatars. And I very rarely remember what everybody's name is. I'm sorry. I really, it, it doesn't stick in my head. Avatars stick in my head. So, because I'm a very visual person again, but enough about me. Let's get to some of your questions. Let's see who else we got here. Barry telling me you can hear me. Great. Let's see. Brian saying, "Hey, RJ." Let's see. RJ the Owl. Yeah, a lot of people have asked me why I picked this symbol. Well, number one, it's easier to fit in than the shield. And number two, it's the Owl of Athena. This is an ancient Greek coin, which is a symbol for wisdom. So, not that I purport to be wise in any way, but at the very least, I think it fits in with my channel a lot because I think the currency of my channel is knowledge. Hopefully, anyways, because you all give me new things to think about. That's why. Daniel has the questions. No, he doesn't. He just says, "I should do a collaboration with Professor Geek." Yes, I did mention in my last live stream, which was a couple of weeks ago, that Professor Geek and I did talk about getting together. I think just things have gotten a little bit out of control because I started my campaign a little bit after we talked about that, and we never actually got back to each other. But we probably will in the future. Nerdette, Tristan, yes. Let's see. Let's see if we have any questions. Anthony says, there are other variables, insights, experiences that you need to assemble the clues. Things that no supercomputer have. Completely right. I agree completely, Anthony. This is exactly why I think that allowing a computer to do all of the data collection for him of all the clues does not work. Again, you hit the nail right on the head right there. Let's see. Okay, scrolling down. Scrolling down. See if I can find questions. I just ask everybody if they have a question, just to put a question mark at the end of it so I can pick it out fairly easily in my chat stream. Once again, I should play, or at the very least, try to play in the background the video that I have prepared for this while I read the comments. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can still put on. Okay, there we go. Like I said, I apologize for my lack of preparedness, but I'm as prepared as I think I can be. Oh, right. Talking in paragraphs. Would that be me or Tom Taylor? Well, it could be both of us. At the very least, I don't write in paragraphs. When you get my book, I am sure a lot of you have ordered my book, my graphic novel. By the way, the link for it is in the description. I'll probably show some of the art for that in a little bit, but I don't talk in paragraphs. I don't have my characters talk in paragraphs. It is very action centered. So, Nerdette says, Pink, RJ the wrestler, pink and green spandex and all. No, I'm sorry. This is a line I use every day, almost, no, not say every day, in my everyday life a lot. Spandex is no one's friend. I'm sorry. As much as I like superheroes, spandex is no one's friend. Most people in life should learn that. I don't care what your body shape is. I don't care if you're a supermodel. Spandex is not your friend. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. Do we have any questions? Let's see. Pedro. Physics. Wokeness doesn't need such things. They have inclusivity. Well, and that's exactly the way that Tom Taylor would write. Honestly, though, as bad as Tom Taylor is, he's not as bad as some of the Marvel writers. I'll tell you that, because their inclusivity is like Squirrel Girl or some of the other ridiculous Marvel comics. It's, as I used to say on my channel, I haven't said it in a while, the universe bends around the characters in order to fulfill their wishes and their desires, because they need to be fulfilled because they're woke. At the very least, again, DC hasn't sunk to that level yet, although it's pretty far hitting the bottom of the barrel at times. Nerdette says it's not woke, just boring, not good. Again, I would agree. I would agree completely. However, I think it's not woke in the storytelling, at the very least, which Tom Taylor usually puts into his storytelling. I'm sure we'll get to the woke part at some point within this book, within this miniseries. But I think, again, it's woke in the fact that he doesn't realize that reality works on certain principles, and that's a woke thing, to not understand that reality has rules. And especially when you're writing for a comic that's called The Detective. Yeah. That's why I did give it a lesser score in, when I gave it my 10-second comic review. I have two scores, one in present day and one in a healthy industry. And if it's any kind of woke whatsoever, it goes down in the score for in a healthy industry, which I think I gave this one a 5, although a low 5. In today's market and in a healthy industry, I gave it a 4. So yeah, it has that going for it. Let's see. Here's a big old comment. Francisco. I tried to read his Hellblazer special. I dropped it on page 5 where some kids were smoking on the rain, and one of them tried to turn on a candle. What? I don't understand. On the Rain. I'm sorry, Francisco. Um, I'm sure it's not you. I'm sure it's Tom Taylor and his storytelling, but I don't understand what exactly was going on in what you're trying to describe. Again, Fizchozo says physics doesn't exist in comics. Just look at Superman. Yes, physics exists in comics. I'm sorry, Fizchozo. I disagree. At the very least, we'll have to say that if you're going to break the rules of reality, that's what I'm always talking about with storytelling. You have to have a set number of rules for reality. And if you're going to break the rules, I understand that the rules can be broken in these kinds of stories, fantastical stories and science fiction kinds of stories. But if you're going to break the rules, you got to have some reason why the rules are broken. And again, you're going to break the rules of physics saying someone can fly. Okay, I understand that, but you're going to have to prepare the reason for why someone can fly, even though you might not give a physical reason for it. You just say Superman can fly. But we're talking about Batman here, and especially the fact that Batman is looking for clues. Again, if you're going to base your story upon looking for clues and trying to figure out things according to how a detective would do things, you think that physics would play a part in that. I would, anyways. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. There's Tom. How you doing, Tom? We're just missing old man. Tom Taylor doesn't know who. Let's see. Run together. How to write. Oh, sorry. My apologies. I had to pick out what exactly you were saying there. Yes, Tom Taylor. Well, I would say. Well, I'll agree with you there. He doesn't know how to write. He could put together a good story, but he always shoots himself in the foot. So yeah, let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Nernet says Tom is usually good. This was his worst book. Well, I wouldn't say this was his worst book. No, not by a long shot. Again, I think that Tom Taylor has his moments, but he ends up just destroying everything he's built by woke nonsense. And I'm sure, like I said, it's going to happen in this story as well. If he was writing one shots and maybe was able to put together a story that didn't have any woke nonsense in it for a one shot, maybe, but he just can't help himself. He just can't. Although, uh, if you look at his Twitter feed and everything else, you can probably understand why. Let's see. Scrolling down, the current Batman in the comics is broke. Well, that was one of the things that I was going to talk about. Well, thinking about talking about, anyways. A lot of people when I went on Literature Devil's live stream, um, we talked about Batman for a while. He likes Superman mostly, and one of the main people he usually has on with him has Batman or likes Batman as their main character for comics. And we're talking about what my favorite Batman was, and I would say that we'll say early '80s, late '70s Batman. Let's see, who was the wasn't the writer at that time. It was more the artist at that time. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was Art. No. Oh, who in the world was it? The fellow who started Continuity Comics. Oh, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Anyways, that would be the Batman that I would identify with as being the true Batman. Um, and even though it was before my time, usually, that is to say, I didn't buy Batman at the time. I had to go back and buy them. I buy them from Backstock. It's because, again, he was the detective at the time. I could just remember the old stories of Batman. He'd be leaning over a clue of some kind, and you try to figure out what exactly he was looking at, or talking about, or thinking about. And he put things together, and you had Batman specials where he was. What was I talked about this in one of my videos where he was in it with Sherlock Holmes. He was in a special with Sherlock Holmes because the two. It was, I think it was tagged as the two greatest detectives of all time finally together. That's the Batman that I think is the best Batman, and that is Batman that is not broken. But yes, Batman currently is broken in a number of different ways. And again, I think it has a little bit to do with the fact that he's a millionaire, billionaire, whatever it is. Uh, but how to fix that, I don't know if DC is going at it in the correct way right now. Let's see, scrolling down, Nerdette says he's a millionaire. Yes, I think billionaire would probably be a little more accurate, but I'm not entirely sure. Although, Nerdette, you probably know better than I do. I only read the first issue of the last story arc of Nightwing, and I think he also just became a millionaire once again because Alfred left him all of his money. But whether or not they kept that in the storyline, I don't know. Hail the chat. Oz, great sage. Hail the chat indeed. We have Drexel. Drexel, how you doing? I'm doing good. Let's see, scrolling down. Why do American comic books keep reimagining characters? While in manga, the characters get their arcs, a new character, and new characters get their stories told. Honestly, it's because they're lazy. Honestly, I would say American comics are lazy. Um, I don't know where and when this started to be brought about. Actually, the video that I'm going to do on Saturday, or the one that I'm planning to do on Saturday, unless something else pops up, um, we'll talk about this a little bit because I think it's a corporate mentality. The more the corporate mentality got into comics, the less creative they became, and they became lazy. Like I said, I'll probably talk more about this on my Saturday video. But yeah, it's because they're lazy. They're lazy, so they want to milk the cash cow for as much as possible. And even if it has diminishing returns, they're still going to milk the cash cow. And that's why they want to keep on using the same characters over and over and over again. And I do realize that it is quite specifically, I would say, an American thing, because if you look at not just comics, but other things like television shows, a lot of other places that used to put out television shows, again, when television and things like Netflix or even YouTube didn't even exist, most other places put out very short television shows. They would put out one, maybe two seasons of a television show, and then it would end. And that would just be the way things work. Again, you could see this with anime right now, and yes, with manga to some extent, but they don't beat a dead horse. They realize that they want to end on a high and they say, okay, we're done. We're going to move on to the next character. But again, it's because they're lazy, quite specifically. They want to milk the cash cow for as much as possible. And they just continue because people will give them their money for it. And unfortunately, I can tell you right now, I'm part of the problem because I will still buy. Well, I don't know if I'll buy Wolverine right now. Honestly, I won't, which is my favorite character because I think they've killed that character in so many ways. He is dead to me now. But I'll still buy a Batman. So let's see. Pauline says the Green Lantern story was more bizarre than Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol and Animal Man run. Well, I agree there. If it was a Green Lantern story, okay, confirmation it was a Green Lantern story. Yes, it was bizarre. I have read some Doom Patrol, and I used to have a lot of Animal Man. I still do somewhere in the recesses of my collection. I think the more bizarre of those books would probably be Shade the Changing Man. But anyway, yes, bizarre, bizarre indeed. I was one of those people, by the way, who bought Doom Patrol from issue number one because it looked like the 1950s Doom Patrol, and then I gave up on it before it got weird. So I actually regretted that to some degree because um, the price for the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol when he took over just shot up after it came out. Although I'm not so worried about it now because right now it's worth nothing. So let's see, Doom Patrol. Nerdette seems to like Doom Patrol. Again, Nerdette depends on what version of Doom Patrol you're talking about. If you're talking about the old version, I would agree. The bizarre Grant Morrison, I never took to that. Let's see. Sequential says, RJ, what are your thoughts on Marvel dumping Diamond as their distributor? It feels like 1996 all over again when they did this with Heroes World. Honestly, it takes me a while. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere. On a, I think I want to do up a map of where I live as a joke, and I'll put a giant circle that says nowhere, and then in the middle a dot and says you are here, because I live in the middle of nowhere. And it takes me a long time to get out from where I am to a place where a comic shop actually is. But I'm making that trek usually about once a week, not more than once a week. Sometimes it takes me a couple of weeks to get there, but I try to get there once a week, and it's a trek. But if comics were in stores like they used to be, if they were in supermarkets like they used to be, if they were in drugstores like they used to be, it would take me, I don't know, half the time to get to one of those and buy comics, and I would buy the comics there. So I'm hoping and praying that with the dumping of Diamond, things might go back to normal. I'm sorry for the comic shop owners. I really am, because they built their businesses upon this model and thinking that it was going to last forever. But something's going to break, and they are probably the weakest link. So they're the ones that are going to break. And I really love the fact that I can go and pick up back issues while I'm at my comic store. But I would rather have the convenience of buying off the rack again, of buying at the drugstore, or going to the magazine rack while we're at the grocery store or something like that and getting my comics. And if dumping Diamond actually moves us in that direction, either I don't know, I would say either directly or indirectly, I think that's going to make it worth it. Let's see. Drexel, I think I'm pronouncing your name right, Drexel. RJ, in your opinion, what DC event or book marked the ruin of the DC universe? Um, I don't think it was so much. Well, here's the funny thing. That's a really good question. This is why I love doing live streams, by the way. I know that I'm probably bumbling around compared to most people in their live streams, but I love doing live streams because you guys have the best questions. It gives me so much new to think about. Honestly, this is a really good question. It's not so I loved Crisis and Infinite Earths. Besides the fact that I really loved the multiple DC Earths before that, and I think that the multiple DC Earths really worked well. I still loved Crises on Infinite Earths. I still loved the next event, which came out after that, which is a much smaller event called Legends. But when you got into the next couple of events, what were the next couple of events after that? And then we're talking 1980s, late 1980s, 1990s, where you get things like Invasion. What else did you get? I think the last of the last nail in the coffin for the bad DC events was 0 Hour, and everything after that is just a cut and paste of all of the events that came before. So it's the fact that events need to happen that destroy everything. Um, Honestly, I'll give you a little bit about my book. Some of the backstory, again, I'll give you backstory, which is quote unquote backstory for my graphic novel, which is Thomas Valiant. Um, because the way I wrote the story was I wanted to take the Amalgam universe, which was sort of an event for both Marvel and DC, where they took their characters and merged them into one took different characters, right? Like Batman and Wolverine, they merged them into one. They took Captain America and Superman and merged them into one. And I thought to myself, okay, let's have a universe like that, where you had characters like that. That's why some of the characters in my book look really similar to something you're going to see in Marvel and DC, and say, what would happen if you took that world and you moved it 30 years into the future, 40 years maybe, depends on how long ago it was, and what would it look like? That would be my characters and my backdrop to my story, okay? Um, but part of the backstory, which I don't get into in my graphic novel, I wrote a whole bunch of backstory for my graphic novel, Thomas Valiant. Again, my artist, Renzo Rodriguez, probably hates me because he has to read all of the backstory. But some of the backstory that I've written for it is that all of these events kept happening in this universe, and these quote unquote heroes, because they really weren't heroes, they were heroes like you see in Marvel and DC right now, not being heroic. Uh, Part of what broke them was the fact that they would keep on going through these events one after another, and they learned after a while that nothing they could do would actually change anything. Again, this is what I'm going to say as quote unquote backstory, because whether or not this actually gets into the book or not, I don't know, but it helped me write my story. The idea was that um, reality has fixed rules, because I'm always talking about that logically. You got to have a story with fixed rules. And so their reality had fixed rules. And so they actually got to an event, and it was a major catastrophe that was going to destroy the universe. And it actually happened. And then reality just snapped back, because reality won't put up with people trying to destroy the universe. Reality has rules, and they can try, these super beings can try to destroy the universe if they want, but it's not going to work. And so all of these quote unquote heroes of this universe, again, wherein my story, my graphic novel, link in the description, is set upon, is the fact that these heroes learn the fact that they've been fighting these events this entire time, trying to make sure that the earth stays from being destroyed, keeps from being destroyed, or the universe keeps from being destroyed. And they actually did zero good, because reality wills out. Okay, reality is going to make sure everything comes back. So again, it's events that really kill it. It's not this event or that event, and these events in themselves, within the story, within the internal story, actually killed Marvel or DC. It's the fact that you kept having events after events after events. It was the continual recycling of these events that really killed both. I think DC more than Marvel at this point. But the thing is that when you have this, again, you have to vamp it up every time, and you have to make the stakes higher and higher and higher in order to continue your sales, or they're just going to say, oh, it's just a rehashing of this event. Or why would I bother reading this event or caring about it when the last event was much more spectacular? So if you try to do one event and you keep on basing things upon events themselves, then you're going to have to continually raise the stakes. And if you continually raise the stakes, you're bringing about a universe and a world wherein the humanity of your story is completely lost. And I'm sorry to go on so long about this, Dextral, but that's why I was saying this is a really good question. That's the problem. You can't keep things at a human level when that happens. And if you can't keep things at a human level, then your reader can't engage with the story on a human level. And when they can't do that, then the story just gets lost. And you're just telling random facts, or you're showing random pictures. If there's no humanity, then what's the point? And I think that's the problem with most stories within Marvel and DC right now, besides the whole woke nonsense. It's, what's the point? There's no humanity in this. I just read Donny Cates's Thor. This was one of the other books that I thought I would do this week for my disaster, although it's not as much as a disaster as this book, Batman the Detective. There's no humanity in his writing. He knows how to construct a story well. He knows how to put elements together. He knows how to make things work, but it's like a computer writes the story, and there's no soul to it. It's because I don't think he really understands how human beings work. Honestly, I really don't think he does. And when you can't understand, or when you as a writer can't understand how human beings work, and you kill that connection with the humanity of the reader, then I'm sorry, your story is lost. It's gone. And that's what one of the major problems with events is. Sorry to rail on that so much. We'll be back says, I have a question. If I want to improve in reason and logic, what should I read? Oh, that's a really hard question. It honestly, it depends on your level of where you are on the scale of what you have read before, or there are so many levels to reason and logic that it's really hard to tell. Trying to jump in with both feet is, which is what I did and continue to do, is not exactly the best idea in the world. There's a book, it's a fairly small book called Thomistic Logic. I think it's called To Mystic Logic. It's a small book that used to be a very widespread uh, book in widespread use, probably in the 1950s. And if you're looking for a breakdown of why things are what they are and to have everything listed and tagged and named and defined, you'd probably have to go to that book. You could also read Aristotle's Posterior Analytics, or um, there's two books in his logic. He writes two books of logic. Um, one is prior analytics, and the other is posterior analytics. It looks like geometry. I think one of them, I think it's posterior analytics, looks like geometry. You could read some of those books. Again, it depends on whether or not you are versed enough to understand exactly what's going on. Although I'll have to say, for me anyways, I don't know how your brain works, because everybody's brain works, I think, in a different way. Certainly my brain works differently than most people's. I pick things up little by little, and I read these books anyways, even though I don't understand exactly what's going on. And then it usually just dawns on me, oh, that's what they meant. But yeah, those are the kinds of books that I would read: ancient or medieval treatises on logic and reason, because that way you don't get sucked into the modern logic problem, which is the fact that they put everything in a logic box and it's just game theory. Basically, it's not based upon reality. So again, I would say Aristotle's logic, or I wouldn't go back to anything written by Thomas Aquinas himself, because it's just so dense. But there is a book written about his logic called Thomistic Logic. I don't remember off the top of my head who exactly wrote it, but it's a fairly old book, probably from the 30s or 40s. I think it was translated into English because it was originally written in Latin, translated by a professor at St. Dunstan's University, but I don't know if that's going to help you any. But those would be my recommendations. I am here. Well, great to hear. Gang's all here. I'm sorry. I'm not going to pronounce your name every time because it's Comics Booger, and I just moving on. Scrolling down. I'll have to get to your name in a little bit. Maybe some other podcast when I have the time. All right, let's see if we can get a couple more questions in here. Oh, good heavens, we're almost on an hour. Dark Tiger says, what is the character most disgraced by the SJWs in your opinion? The one that's most disgraced, okay. The one that's most destroyed is probably Captain America. The one that hurts the most, for me anyways, is Wolverine. But the one that's most disgraced would be Hawkeye. Just straight up. I did a video about this almost at the first of my channel, talking about why Kate Bishop's Hawkeye is the most distasteful thing in the world, besides the fact that she's not a hero. She disgraces Hawkeye as a hero completely, in every way, absolutely every way. I know Hawkeye is probably a second tier character, if not a third tier character, but he was always a character that was in the Avengers off and on. But he was a true hero in the sense that all he had was a bow and some trick arrows, and he was standing on a battlefield with gods and monsters, and he was holding his own. And it was his arrogance to some degree that allowed that to happen. But at the same time, when you got into early 80s, when they did the miniseries for Hawkeye, which were great books at the time, they don't read so well now, but at the time, you got to see a lot of the things that Hawkeye had to go through in order to maintain his ability to stand on that battlefield. The fact that a villain picked up his bow and tried to shoot an arrow, and then it exploded in his face because he couldn't even draw the bow back enough to make the arrow go more than half a foot. And it just spoke to the strength and the training and the discipline needed for this man in order to be who he was, in order to be the hero who he was. And that has been completely and utterly destroyed by Kate Bishop and by the writers that have been writing Hawkeye for the last 10 years, however long it's been since Kate Bishop came out. That would be my opinion. I'm sure others might have valid opinions on the same. Let's see, scrolling down. Scrolling down. What does that AOE? Oh, it's just it's old Greek. It's not. It's alpha. What is it? I'm not sure what it stands for. It's an ancient Greek coin. Anyways, probably stands for Athena. It is an ancient, I think, Athenian coin, obviously because it's about uh, it's the bird of Athena. So um, that's the reason why, as I said, I picked the coin was because hopefully wisdom is the currency that I try to deal in on my channel. And what better representation of the currency of wisdom than a coin with the bird of wisdom on it, which again is a representation of Athena, who is the god of wisdom. Let's see. Again, I don't remember the exact. It's an acronym or a short form for a Greek word, and I'm not entirely sure what it is off the top of my head. Let's see. Let's see. So RJ is talking. Okay. Yeah, yeah. We'll just call him Bobo. If anybody gets that reference, we'll call him Bobo. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Question here. Could companies be publishing divisive critical theory propaganda to demoralize those with traditional values on behalf of China? Maybe they are attempting to sprinkle the infield to do business with CCP. No. Yes and no, I guess. It's kind of a good question, but I think China doesn't care. Honestly, China doesn't care. Uh, by the way, that was one of the things I talked about early in my channel. The funny Chinese commercials. The Chinese, I won't call them Chinese racist, but um, uh, they care about race as much as someone in the 1950s, wrong side of the tracks of New York would care about race. Um, Everybody is called by what they determine they want to call them. They have no care about your feelings, nor do they care about all of this critical theory nonsense. They're in control. They don't care. So again, I don't think it's connected to China in any way. Uh, I think it benefits China in the fact that it weakens America, but I certainly don't think that it has anything to do with such kind of infiltration. We'll have to say. What you see right now, again, this is my historian brain working, and my first degree was in history at a time when the Soviet Union was actually still a thing. Um, this is what you see now is all the playing out of the plans of the Soviet Union. These are all the fruits of what was put in place by the Soviet Unions in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And that's where you see the stuff coming from. China's the recipient. China's the one who is getting to benefit from that because the Soviet Union no longer is anything besides a memory. But yeah, no. Again, I don't think China has much to do with these kinds of things except for sitting back and laughing at us. Although I have to say that yes, critical theory is meant to demoralize those people with traditional values. But it's the crazy woke SJWs who buy the line of communism is good that want to demoralize us. Let's see. We got another question here. Biker Man. Hey RJ, I'm a lurker generally, but it would be rude not to contribute. So, do you think Marvel is now past the point of no return and doomed to die? Well, if let me put it this way, if it continues to be owned by Disney, it will die. And I don't know if there's any way that it can be taken out of the grasp of Disney, but if there were something to happen that would allow it to be put under different management besides Disney, the characters could live. But honestly, I don't think that is ever going to happen. And yes, I think it is. Well, it's not going to die because they have to keep their IPs alive, and comics are the best way to do that because you can't continually come out with a movie or a television show in order to keep your IP alive, your intellectual property. But comic books are an easy way to do that. So they're always going to have comics, and they're always going to have Marvel comics, and they're always going to put out these characters that everybody loves because, again, it's the easiest way to make sure they hold on to their intellectual property. So again, it's going to be a zombie, which it is now, for many, many years to come. We'll put it that way. All right. Scrolling down. Let's see. It might be interesting if you analyze a Batman story that you like and compare it to ones like this one that you do not like. Well, I was hoping to do that with this live stream, but I never actually got to get into my backstock of Batman titles. Honestly, I would like to do such a thing in the future. That would be very, very enjoyable. That would probably be one of my Saturday videos, and talking about why Batman used to work in storytelling. I should add that to my list. I got a list as long as my arm about how many videos that I would like to do if I had time. I will add that to my list. I have a small mountain of long boxes, so getting to actual issues sometimes is a chore, especially when I get sidetracked looking through comics, which I often do. Let's see. Question from David. Do you think Spider-Man loses what makes him a unique hero because of the multiple spider people Marvel keep making? Yes, indeed. Completely. Completely and utterly. This is one of the problems with Spider-Man right now. The whole, what do they call it? I don't even know what they have a name for it. And I read it in a Spider-Man book last month and it just dropped out of my brain. They call it, I don't know, something of the web. They have all the spider people and they make up some kind of organization now. I don't exactly understand what it is, nor do I think it's a good thing. But yes, having all of these characters that look like Spider-Man, that have the Spider-Man powers, and yet are somehow better than Peter Parker, it kills Spider-Man as a character. Again, this is them milking the cow dry. Um, because Spider-Man sells, because Spider-Man will get you some sales, then why not make other characters that look like Spider-Man? And therefore, we can just ride the coattails of old stories, and it kills the character completely. Honestly, I at this point, I used to not like the idea of moving on with characters or having them grow old, but at this point, I just want Peter Parker to grow old. If they would have done that storyline where his daughter would become the new Spider-Man, I don't care. A female Spider-Man, that's fine by me. If she's a legacy character, a true legacy character, the daughter of Peter Parker, that would be a good Marvel, a healthy Marvel, and a good storyline. So let's see. Oh, I've already gone over my hour, so I'll see if I can get through as many comments as I can before I have to go. Anthony says, I live in a tropical island. A cosplayer went to a comic writer's anniversary outside of a comic store with a rubber Batman suit. He nearly he nearly dehydrated in less than 15 minutes and had to ditch the suit. That's a funny story. Okay, yeah. Cosplay is not something I think contributes to the heroic ideal. How's that? We'll just leave it at that. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down, people talking about spandex there. Spandex doesn't allow to sweat. All the insides get sticky. Believe me, it doesn't matter if you're fat, regular, or a superhero model figure. Okay. I don't know. I don't wear spandex, nor do I intend ever to do so. I wear things that can allow me to move, not spandex. Let's see. Resistance says, hail the chat. Okay. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Alias Jones. What would you recommend for a good detective story less about piecing together physical clues and more about human interaction clues? That's a good one. Honestly, like I said, I don't know if there's many pulp fiction novels written about, um, certainly not anymore, written about the shadow, but that's the kind of thing that you would find in the shadow. Again, it's about human interaction. It's like old black and white movies because, well, Shadow is a character that was in that era, but where you had to uh, piece together from human interaction what was going on because you didn't actually get to see the clues. It's not like a modern mystery novel where you're a detective and you get to see the thinking of the detective as he's going through the clues and try to put them together before he does, which is a good kind of story, I'll admit. But if you're looking at human interaction, again, those old kinds of 50s kinds of movies like The Thin Man or stuff like that. That's human interaction. Those are very good stories. Again, The Shadow. If again you're looking for comic book kinds of stories, probably The Shadow. But my my favorite one in that kind of vein would probably be the Thin Man series. All right, so moving down. I'm gonna see if I can concentrate on questions here right now. Scrolling down. Let's see. No, I have not. Have I seen Invincible on Amazon? Um, no, I don't actually. Let me put it this way: I have a computer. I don't own a television. Yes, I can access things like Netflix from my computer. I don't actually have an account. I honestly, I have someone who I borrow their account every once in a while because I don't watch a lot of television. Um, my major, uh, we'll say, input from what pop culture is comics. It just is. That's the only thing that I can concentrate on. Let's see. Aaron says, I'm planning on writing a comic set during the Cold War. Any suggestions on how to research? Any suggestions on how to research? Huh. Well, I'll give you, at the very least, I'll give you my idea of how to research because I was thinking to myself, well, I'm actually going to do a similar kind of thing. I'm not going to write it about the Cold War. I've been talking to a few writers and a few artists about some future projects that we might be working on, and for my Thomas Valiant universe, really, because there's going to be more. And I thought to myself, well, I should put out comics. Um, I should do backstory comics at the very least and put them in, we'll say, a floppy format, or maybe do three and put them together in a graphic novel so it would be comparable to the length of the graphic novel that I'm putting out right now. But it would be set in, 1960 or 1985 or 1990. And I want to have an actual feel for that time and place. Um, it depends on whether or not you were alive during that time, whether or not you're actually remembering, or whether or not you're trying to experience it for the first time. For myself, and when I want to remember these things and get into the groove about reading, writing within this time period, I steep myself in that time period itself. Um, I go back and do things like, if you have a library that has old encyclopedias, they used to have a yearbook that would come out every year with current events. Pick up one of the yearbooks, say for like World Book or something like that, which would be a very simple one. Probably simple, that is to say, to find. If again you still have a library that has old encyclopedias, pick up something like a 1985 yearbook and see what was going on, and look at all the things that are listed there as part of culture and part of news stories, and just steep yourself in it. That's what I was thinking of doing when writing my old stories as well, because it will give you, what movies came out that year, what songs were at the top of the charts, and what news stories were making the rounds. And you could, now that you have the internet at your disposal, you can go back and just watch all of those. Because it usually gives like the top 10 shows as well. You go back and just watch those shows over like a period of a week, and watch all the old movies and read all the old stories, and steep yourself in it. I think, sorry to take so long to answer that question, but yeah, that would be my idea of how to do that. So scrolling down, let's see, scrolling down. Neil Adams, yes, thank you. Thank you, Neil Adams, Spider-Man. Or sorry, Batman. Neil, I don't know where my brain is. JD, beautiful picture there, JD. You look stunning in blue. All right, Neil Adams. Neil Adams Batman is what I was trying to think of. I don't know how far I am down from the chat, from the end of this chat. Holy Moses. Let's see. Dextril says, would you say that Batman, amongst others, lacks consistency? I would say the writers for Batman lack consistency. The modern Batman lacks consistency. I think that, I don't know. Honestly, somewhere between the end of the 1990s and the 2010s, Batman became broken beyond repair. Unless they want to reboot the universe, which, being DC, they could certainly do. But yeah, he lacks consistency in the fact that he is no longer what he was originally set out to be as a character or an individual or a hero, and therefore why he is still doing the things that he's doing, I don't know. So with that lack of consistency, the character doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let's see. Anthony says, I've been listening to your videos since 4 years ago. Have I been doing the videos for 4 years? Really? Honestly? I don't think I've been doing this for 4 years, have I? Good heavens. And I'm still flabbergasted at how on the nose you were with both Disney and Marvel, have gone straight into the abyss. Gratitude doesn't cover it. Well, I just call it like I see it. Most people don't like that in my normal everyday life, but I'm glad somebody appreciates it. Let's see. Scrolling down. 1970 to 1983. To me, that was the real Batman. I think Jerry Conway's run with Gene Colan and Don Newton was the very best Batman era. Well, certainly, I would agree that that was the best Batman era. I think my best Batman story is the best. Well, honestly, there are some best and some worst Batman stories in there, but at the same time, yeah, I would agree that's the time for Batman blooming as a hero. Let's see, scrolling down. How would be the ideal Batman in terms of the trauma of his parents, his social life, his priorities, etc.? I don't know. Honestly, I think like I just said in the last, answering the last question or going over the last comment, I think the ideal Batman was end of the 70s, early 1980s. That was the ideal Batman. Scrolling down. Do you think Marvel should make Monica Rambeau and push Carol to the sideline since fans don't like her? I like Monica Rambeau. I really do. I think she was an overpowered character from the get-go, though. Whether or not Marvel could actually do such a thing, especially in the movies, I don't know. They're so oblivious to how much woke nonsense they put into their stuff. They don't even realize it. I've come to realize this studying their stuff and listening to their podcasts. They don't even realize they're so steeped in their own mindset that they can't get out of it. Now, I understand that I'm steeped in my own mindset and it takes me a while to get out of it myself, but I try to see things from their perspective, and then I look at it and I go back and it's part of what I was, I don't know, won't say trained to do, but what I did in university is try to figure out where these people are coming from and where their ideas are going, where they have been. But they don't understand. They're so oblivious that they can't do that. So they can't make Monica Rambeau without being woke. They just can't. And again, the problem with Monica Rambeau is that she was, to some extent, a broken character to begin with because she was just so overpowered. I think the series that called that out was X-Men versus Avengers. Let's see. I think it was John Romita Jr. that actually did the art for that. It was a really good series, beautiful series. But you had Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel, flying right beside Rogue, and then she just changed direction completely without even slowing down. And the writers, I think, realized at that point, because it was even part of the stories, they realized that Monica Rambeau is just so overpowered that if she can actually do all this, move at the speed of light and control light to that extent, that there's no way this character um, can actually still exist in the Marvel universe and have anybody um, put up with or even battle her, because she would just take anything down. Scrolling down, DC and Marvel lack consistency. Have you looked at any comic book over 5 years? Have I looked at any comic book over 5 years? Over 5 years old? Well, um, again, I have a gap in my comic reading because I did give up on comics for a little while. That is to say, new comics between the end of the 90s and the 2010s, anyways. So I've been trying to catch up, although it's desperately hard to try to get some of that material and watch where the destruction of the heroes that I loved actually comes from. But again, like I said, I do realize, and hopefully, um, a lot of people also that listen to me realize that I do have a gap in my comic reading um, knowledge, because it's very, very deep within the late 70s, all the way through the 80s, early to mid 90s. But when you get into the late and early aughts, I do have a gap until we get to what we have now. But yes, they do lack consistency. Again, I think, and part of the reason why I can't understand where their lack of consistency comes from is because it came from that gap in my own reading. Vischosa says Diamond Distributors made comics non-returnable in 1997, causing comic book stores not to order original products. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Scrolling down. Okay. Say, hey RJ, old time listener, first time catching a live stream. That's because this is one of my first live streams. It's probably just about the fourth one that I'd done. And I'm just getting into this. Apologize again to everyone for my crude presentation. Let's see. Scrolling down. Dark Tiger, no, I do not live in Area 51. I honestly live on an island. Yes, I live on an island somewhere in the Atlantic. And that's about all I'm going to say about that. Although it's a fairly big island, so, I also live in the woods, which is funny. I could walk one direction from my house and get lost in the woods, in another direction from my house and go through the woods to get to the beach. Let's see. Scrolling down. Hey, Nick's here. Great. I apologize to everyone if I'm so far behind on going through these questions, going through the chat. I talk way too much. Great to see you, Nick. Nick is the cover artist for Thomas Valiant. Let's see. I can't. I'm sorry to everyone if I'm again behind in trying to put up some of the art that I have. Let's put some of the Thomas Valiant art up there in the background. Like I said, Nick is my cover artist and also does some of the pinups. And if we actually can swing something, probably the artist for one of my upcoming books. All depends on if the world keeps turning. Let's see. Pauline says, how'd you come up with the name The Fourth Age? Love the name. Reminds me of Kirby's Fourth World. The name Fourth Age comes from the fact that in Greek mythology, well, some versions of Greek mythology, the Fourth Age is the age of heroes, and my channel is about heroes. So I named it the Fourth Age because I do believe we need an age of heroes. It also is a play a little bit on the ages of comics. So there's that. But yes, the Fourth Age is the age of heroes. So scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down, Anthony says he got all of Zero Hour. I could not get through most of Zero Hour. It just drove me nuts. Let's see. Scrolling down. Barry has a question. He says, "What makes a good superhero style game?" I honestly don't know. I don't play superhero style games. The only games I've ever played on the computer. I'm a PC person. I've always been a PC, and I don't even play MMORPGs. I just play RPGs. So D&D style games is what I play. So scrolling down, which by the way is far and few and far between at this point. Scrolling down. See if we can get some more questions in here. Metal says, "Hey RJ, knowing how a lot of negativity comes from the new 52, why did Warner Brothers use the storyline and characters reskin from this era? For example, Justice League was an arc in that era." So the question I guess is, why did they want to base everything on the new 52? Because they still haven't given up on it yet. They want to reboot the characters so that they can make them fresh, and I understand to some extent why they want to do that. They just didn't make the characters heroic, and nobody cared anymore. It's I don't know. You look at these characters in the new 52, and while they have interesting stories, again, I think the major problem was that these characters were not heroic. And again, that fits in exactly with Zack Snyder because he doesn't really think much of heroes either, in my opinion. But yeah, they're still they haven't given up on New 52. The fans are the ones that killed it, and rightly so. But DC hasn't given up. So I think that if they were able to make it in the box office with those kinds of stories, they probably would have brought it back in some way, or shape, or form. And it might even come back with this whole multiverse thing that's going on now as well. It might even be back. I don't even know. I don't follow DC as religiously as some people. So, scrolling down, Pauline says, "What can Marvel DC do to rebuild continuity in their universes?" Holy Moses, I don't even know if they can. What can they do to rebuild continuity? They used to have a thing, as far as I know, anyways, because I've never worked in the comic publishing industry, the mainstream one, anyways. Now that I have my book out, I suppose I have, but or getting my book out. They used to have a thing. I think they were called white pages or something of the kind, where they would have all of the character traits and what the characters' personalities were and all that kind of things, and they had to follow it. The writers had to read it, and the writers had to follow it. And if they didn't, then the editors would step in and say, "No, this is wrong." And trust me, I've worked with editors. Holy Moses. If you get a good editor, they will tell you when you are wrong. They will tell you all day that you are wrong. They will say, "This doesn't fit. Get this out of here. Remove this. Write this again. This whole chapter needs to be rewritten." And I think that, again, some of my earlier videos, the first of my channel where I talked about editing a lot, talked about this, where editors can no longer edit because they're just afraid of being called racist and then getting drummed out of their industry for their entire lives, and their entire reason for having this job will be gone. So they can't edit anymore, and so they can't tell bad writers, because most of the writers are hired because they they check off some kind of diversity box, and therefore, if they say anything to them, they're just going to say, "Well, you're thisophobe or thatophobe. That's why you don't like my writing. That's why you don't like my characters." And so editors can't edit, and therefore these writers don't need to stick to any regular way of actually writing a character. And again, there used to be, little booklets about Spider-Man is, you know, not only this height and this many pounds and this body shape, but also he is this kind of person. He has this kind of, we'll say, sense of humor and all that kind of thing. And if you strayed from that, then the editors would say, write it again. So again, how do they rebuild continuity? By having, well, I guess the basic answer to that question would be to have editors edit, and to have writers which they can edit without being called a phobe or an ist of some kind. All right, scrolling down, trying to get to the bottom of the stream or bottom of the chat, because I usually only go an hour, and we're now an hour and a half into my stream. Let's see, scrolling down. Dark Tiger says, they done my boy Hawkeye more than dirty. Yes, they have indeed. I would agree completely. Yes, someone had brought, by the way, this is Nick's art in the background. If you're looking at this beautiful pinup of Phantasm, that's Nick Axe, who is in the chat. Iron Man is dead. Personified, you are correct. I didn't think about Iron Man, but yes, Iron Man is dead, but there have been problems with Iron Man since the 90s. Again, because of the rebuilding of the character within his own image. I think that really started the downward spiral of Iron Man as a character, because of, I don't know what you would even call it, because he became less human. But yes, they certainly disrespected that character beyond belief. Let's see if I can get through some more of these questions. RJ, someone said that today, especially in comics, the speech has been turned, and now the villains act like how heroes would be back in the day, and heroes act like villains. Would you agree? Honestly, I don't know about that. I want to do a video about that. That's actually on my list of things to think about. I want to talk about that because there is a bit of a double edge to answering that question. You have a lot of writers who, as I've done videos about, and I can give you quotes from if I look them up because I have them on my computer somewhere, quotes from all of these, as Marvel would present them, the new crop of writers that will be taking over Marvel in the future, talking about how much they love villains, how they like villains more than heroes, and that's why they concentrate on villains. So those kinds of villains now, those kinds of villains are written as, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could be immoral and no one judged us? Those are the kinds of villains they like to write. So to that extent, no, those villains don't become heroes. But at the same time, you do have something like Ta-Nehisi Coates writing Red Skull so that people are actually identifying more with Red Skull than with Captain America. I watched Sargon's a video on it, and they were reading the text. Sargon doesn't actually read comics, not very much. He used to, anyways. But he doesn't read Captain America, and he was reading the text or having someone read the text to him about the lines from the Red Skull, and after the Red Skull gave his little speech about what he wanted to do for people, Sargon said, "Where do I sign up? That sounds great." Yeah, that's the mentality. So to some extent, people like Ta-Nehisi Coates are creating villains as heroes and heroes as villains. But again, I would have to really, really think about that and delve into it. And I want to do a video about it sometime in the future. So I'm sorry, but I can't answer that question completely. Let's see. Scrolling down. Samuel just says hail lobster, so he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Scrolling down. Literature Devil is here. How you doing? Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see if we got any more questions. Tom says, if you have enough time on Netflix, I strongly recommend Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters. Stretch is very much an aspirational hero like Spider-Man. I have never actually heard of that. Thank you, Tom. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sound engraver. Okay. Oh, she's talking to Samuel. So I will leave that question for Samuel. So scrolling down. Here's a question from Sound Engraver. How familiar are you with Star Wars? I'm publishing a video on the terrible writing of the Siege of Mandalorian arc in the Clone Wars show. So I'm not entirely, I don't follow Star Wars anymore. I just don't. A lot of people have said, what? Have tried to get me to watch The Mandalorian. But again, I have very little time. Again, I don't know. Comic books really are my only window into North American pop culture. My other window into pop culture would be anime and manga. So Star Wars has disrespected storytelling, not even just the characters, but storytelling so much that I no longer even bother myself with it. And I know that I could probably do a whole lot of videos on it, but I'm not going to put myself through that pain. Oh, Jesse's here. Let's see. What books or media should I collect to pass on Western heroism to my children as they're growing up in the post-apocalypse? Jesse, that's funny. Honestly, it depends on where you want to go with what kind of stories that you want to tell them, and what kind of values that you want to instill within them. If you're talking about Western civilization, on its face, what children used to read was Homer and Virgil. So you read the Iliad, you read the Odyssey, you read Virgil's Aeneid, and they were the comic books for the kids in the 19, we'll say not even the 19, we'll say the 1800s. So I don't think that kids, they would have to be pretty well versed in things to have you read them to them. I think reading to children is the point. And once you read to your children these kinds of stories, then you can get them to be interested in heroism in this way. Typically, if you look at something like the old chronicles for King Arthur or the old books for Robin Hood, they would be really good ones to use. But if you're looking for something fanciful and fun, there's a really good book. It's Lady Gregory's Irish Mythology. Maybe it's just me because I'm a Celt. I'm Scottish and through. And reading the Irish mythology, it does have some parallels with Scottish mythology. That is a really big book, and it has many different kinds of stories. And although the characters in these stories are god-like characters, supposedly, they're mostly heroes. Although, again, they're old Celtic heroes, so to some extent, they're certainly pre-Christian, and they won't have what you would consider Christian values. But they are some fun stories to talk to your kids about, and they are some fun stories to read because they're so nonsensical. Uh, the Irish mind, especially Irish storytelling, has a very peculiar way about it, and you have to. I honestly found, because I like to read to myself, that is to say, out loud to myself, and I can do a fairly good Irish accent because I do know some Gaelic, and growing up with people who are straight from Ireland. So I can actually read with a very good Irish accent. Uh, I'm sure someone from Ireland wouldn't think so. But in my head, I can make it sound, because the sentence structure, even in themselves, you got to go up and down in order to really get into the rhythm of the storytelling. But again, it's nonsensical. Lady Gregory's Irish Mythology. It's a big old whopping, I don't know, like 1,200 page book with some really interesting stories. So you could read that to your kids. That would be great, because again, it's nonsensical and fun. Other things would be, again, King Arthur. If you go back to the original, or something close to the original, or the Robin Hood stories. Again, after that point, you might want to get into Homer, or Virgil, or things like that. Also, if you, I don't know, Jesse, if you read French or anything like that, you might be able to find stories of the Paladins. There are others. I don't know. There should be some English translations of that. Let's see. Literature Devil says, does Thomas Valiant snap the neck of his enemies? I hear that's what real heroes do. No, no, I'm sorry. No, he does not. Uh, Thomas Valiant, which is funny enough because I just had this conversation with someone about the fact that they don't think anyone who kills can be a hero. And I said, no, no, it depends on why you kill. Again, there's an idea of a just war. So, yeah, there are heroes out there that can kill. I mean, I look at soldiers. Soldiers are heroes. Soldiers certainly, if you look at police officers, they do kill on occasion, but they still can be heroes. So, yeah. But no, Thomas Valiant does not snap the neck of his enemies. I'm sorry. He is very much in the deception category. He tries to, well, again, tries to is the word, use deception and to, well, I'll not say weasel his way out of things, but that's his that's his way of dealing with things in his life prior to the comic that is going to be in people's hands later on this year. He has to try to figure out a way to get around that, or at the very least, to be more heroic. So, again, my hero actually has to work at being a hero. So, it's more, I have to stop killing people. It's less, I don't know, literature devil, you got me all tied up in knots here. It's not that he has to stop killing people because he never killed people to begin with. It's that he has to stop pretending to be someone who has all the answers. Let's see. More questions for other people, not for me. So scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see. People are starting to talk in the chat to themselves, which is great. I love to see that. Let's see. Have a question. Who would RJ like to live stream with, if anyone? Zach, Perch, Nerdrotic, Doomcock. Well, unfortunately, I'm not set up. I work off of satellite internet, and I've just had to decline Literature Devil's offer to have him on my show or on my podcast because he wanted to be on, and I would love to have Literature Devil on so that I could talk directly with him. But unfortunately, because of my limitations of my internet, it is very difficult for me to stream with anyone. Um, Zach does not like to live stream at all, and I respect that because I can understand where he wants to put his value of time in. I don't know about Perch because not that he's not that I don't want to stream with Perch. It's just that um, I don't know if we would have that much to talk about. I don't know. We'd have to have some common ground. Nerdrotic, I don't know. Nerdrotic, again, I don't know if we have enough common ground. Or Doomcock. Doomcock is only someone I watch on occasion. Someone has said I should live stream with Heels versus Babyface. As honestly, I don't know. It's very. I like to live stream with Michael Bancroft. By the way, I'm probably stepping all over Michael Bancroft's live stream right now. Sorry, Michael. But I like to live stream with him. It's very comfortable. I've done other live streams before, and there are some people who I don't know why, if it's me, if it's them, but it's very uncomfortable to try to talk to them because we just don't have enough common ground. So again, people with a laid back idea, but at the very least, some what some basis in the understanding of how heroism works so Luke can have something to talk about. So, scrolling down, we'll click that off. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Let's see. I got to get to the end of this. stream of chats here. Scrolling down. If I missed your question, I'm sorry, but I'm so far behind that it's starting to jump all over the place when I scroll down. So scrolling down. Incubus says, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Incubus?" Let's see. Scrolling down. Lloyd says, "So the fourth age. I like Irish and Scottish stuff. I don't know why. I just enjoy such stuff." Yeah, so do I. I wish I had it with me right now. I, I have a bookcase next to me, a couple of bookcases next to me, but um, there's a real fun book that was written probably about, well, I don't know, 2000. It was sort of based on Irish mythology with a character called Gilly of the Goatskin. It's fun and it's enjoyable just because it's so nonsensical at times. I agree, Lloyd. Let's see, scrolling down. And my stream just jumped on me again. So, scrolling down. Question. Let's see. Elton has a question. Usually a story with new heroes. Should it show the start of everything, or can we have an ongoing tale? Uh, I don't know. It depends on how you write. It depends on the writer, honestly. To me, again, I'm jumping for my stories. I jump right into the middle. You start with action. The entire first chapter is just my book, which is Thomas Valiant. Link in the description if you haven't picked up a copy yet or haven't pre-ordered your copy yet. It's broken up into 3 chapters and then a little bit of a epilogue at the end. So basically, the first 20 pages is just straight up and you just jump right into it. The first page is the battle has already begun. So, but the reason I did that was because I didn't think I needed to introduce my characters as most of my audience. I tried to visually code what I call, again, this is not a technical term, it's what I call it. I tried to visually code my characters so that they look enough like another comic book character that everyone already would know, so that they understand exactly what their power set or basic power set, not same power set, but basic power set is. So, Thomas Valiant looks like Plastic Man or like Mr. Fantastic, although he has different qualities and can do some different things besides those 2 characters. You already have the basis in your mind. And so a lot of the characters for my book, all of the characters really for my book that are in the foreground are like that. And so I jump right in. So again, depends on how exactly you write. Honestly, the thing is that for a modern audience as well, I don't know if they can stand a long introduction or they'll just put the book down. I would love to write long introduction. I would love to write from the beginning forward, but I don't think. Again, I've worked with editors before. They just tell me that modern audiences will not stand for that. Let's see. Meta says, "Did you talk about the comic yet?" Yes, sorry, Meta. I talked about the comic. Usually I talk about the comic at the first of my live stream, and we are far in excess of what I usually spend in a live stream. So, Incubus says, "You should live stream with Tristan from Nerdette's newsstand." I should. I should. Honestly. I think Nerdette and I have a lot in common. And I would love to pick her brain on various DC topics. Again, unfortunately, my ability to live stream with other people is somewhat limited. So I'll get through the last couple of comments here and then I'll have to get going. MT says, "Well, I think it would be very interesting conversation with Perch because RJ and he holds such different views about what is going on in comics, and RJ has such depth of knowledge of political philosophy." Which is, you honestly think that? Because I've watched some of Perch's videos, and a lot of what he's saying seems to me, anyways, to be a lot of what I used to do when I could get actual concrete numbers for comics. I used to go and do almost every, we'll say every 4 to 6 months, I would do a numbers video where I would go through the numbers, something like Perch has been doing for a while now. These are probably my videos around 2 years ago. So I kind of thought that we would think about things in a similar way when we talk about numbers, but I've never heard him talk about heroes in any kind of way that I talk about heroes. I've certainly heard others like Literature Devil. I'm starting to slur my words. He certainly talks about heroes in the vein that I talk about them as well. So there are people out there that do that, but I didn't see Perch as being one of them. Let's see. Scrolling down, I'm going to try to get to the bottom. Scrolling down. Craig asks, I think he asks me, it's just a general question. Are you a fan of Calvin and Hobbes? Well, yes, I am, but I've read Calvin and Hobbes so many times, probably by the end of the 90s. When did they stop making Calvin and Hobbes? Fairly early on. So unfortunately, there's nothing new for me to read. Let's see now. Literature Devil says, were you a fan of Jawbreakers by your boy Zach? Well, Literature Devil, you're putting me on the spot here. You're opening a can of worms too. Yeah, well, no wonder they call him the Literature Devil. Devil's advocate. Do I like Zach's book? I really like the idea of his characters, and I really like the idea of his stories, and I really like where he is trying to go with his universe. I think, however, he has a lot of problems with, we'll say, jumping all over the place and keeping his story on track, especially when there's a scene cut. I was literally the first person ever to do a review of Zach's stuff, because I reviewed Iron Sights before it even came out, even though I only had, I think it was the first half, and it was a rough draft. And Zach said, sure, go ahead, roast it. Because not only did I say I was going to review it, I said, I'm going to roast this thing. I'm sorry, Zach, I'm going to roast it. Because his cutscenes were just so damn confusing. And I didn't know what was going on half the time. So again, I really like Zach. I like his enthusiasm. I like his characters. I like where he's going. I like his universe. I don't like the way he puts his stories together, unfortunately. But that doesn't stop me from buying them. So scrolling down, Meta Raven says, hail, brother. Hail, Meta Raven 5. Scrolling down. Let's see. Not sure who that question is directed towards. Only the big questions from Literature Devil. Yes, big questions. Okay, I'm going to have to get to the bottom of this chat and get going, because I'm almost going on the 2-hour mark here, and usually I only stream for an hour. So, very diplomatic way of putting it, RJ. Yeah, I'm the thing is that, again, I'm not trying to be, I don't mind stepping on people's toes. I'm not trying to be diplomatic. It's the fact that his story writing could use some improvement. But I love his idea for a universe. Let's see. I can imagine Literature Devil's maniacal cackle right about, yes, I could hear that in my head as well. I could indeed. Okay. I think Elton has the last question, and then I'm going to have to go. Elton says, you think the public could accept a setting that feels more alien to them, like Brazil, or they are too focused in places that are common in other stories? I don't know. I honestly don't know, Elton. It depends on what kind of story you're telling. Again, if you're doing something like international espionage, sure, start it in Brazil. Work on your story in Brazil. Honestly, the rule of thumb, and it's it's been pounded into my head so many times, and it is something that everybody I think needs to learn. It's write what you know, write what you know. So if Brazil is what you know, write about Brazil. Um, honestly, if you can make that place come alive, it's the fact that, again, it has to be human. So again, if you know this city, or if you know this area, if you know a certain location, focus on the unique parts of it and put the human aspect into it, because you're able to do so because you know it so well. You are the human connection there. So yeah, if you know Brazil, write Brazil, because honestly, you just have to find a way to connect with your audience, and I think that would be a wonderful way to do so. Again, write what you know. So I am going to have to go. Well, let's see, one more question. Name a story that is heavily political and executes it well. Oh, great. Now I've been stumped for the last question. A heavily political story that executes it well. Heavy political story. Off the top of my head, if we're talking comic books here, we'll talk comic books. Comic books, it would be The Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, the original book that came out. You read it now and you don't think it's heavily political, but at the time when it came out, it was heavily political. It did execute it well. So I'm going to have to leave it at that, at The Dark Knight. So I thank everyone for showing up, and everyone who has contributed to the chat. Thank you very much. I will try to do a regular live stream at this time every Thursday if you wish to come back. Also, first of all, my regular videos are every Saturday. If I'm late, it's going to be a Sunday, but usually every weekend is when I put up my regular videos. I have in the background right now pages from Thomas Valiant, my graphic novel. The link for it is in the description if anyone has not been able to get a copy of it yet. And also, I just wanted to, I wish I could put this up on screen, but it's not allowing me to do so right now. I have a couple of new pages from Renzo, my artist, for Thomas Valiant, but for some reason they're not going up on the screen for me right at the moment. And also, there is another Indiegogo campaign that I want to plug that I myself have just bought. It's called Fiendish. Let's see if I can. I don't have the link right now. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. Let me see if I can do that. I'm plugging this book because here's someone who I think has a spectacular book, and I want to make sure that good comics get out there. So I will do my best every now and then to promote a good book, probably one every live stream. And the link there is in the description for Fiendish. If you like anime or manga, it is a interesting, I would say, take on anime and manga with a Lovecraftian kind of story. So if that sounds in any way appealing to you, you might want to check that out. All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. I thank you, everyone, for coming to my live stream, listening to me fumble and bumble about as I try to explain my own thoughts, which I don't know if ever they make any sense. All right, I'll see y'all later.